Hey guys, what's good? Welcome back to JDB Selects. Hope you all had a great Easter and enjoyed 5 days of footy. Another round full of super close games, few massive upsets as to be expected. Let's have a look at my round 6 results. So going over last week, we only managed to tip 4 out of 8 games, which seems to be a common occurrence so far this season. The Cowboys were upset by the Dolphins at home. The Broncos were also upset at home by the Raiders. The Dragons' ill discipline let them down late against the Titans, and the Warriors couldn't stage another comeback this week against the Newcastle Knights. We are also running a subscribers tipping comp this season. All the details to join are shown on screen now, so get involved if you are keen. Shout out to Rick21T, who is still atop the JDB Selects leaderboard after 6 rounds. Congrats, mate. Good luck to everyone else again this week. It's been a super hard season to tip, but hopefully we can see another perfect round this week. Round 7 gets underway with the 4th place Redcliffe Dolphins taking on the 10th place South Sydney Rabbitohs at Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane. The Dolphins upset the Cowboys at home last week 32 points to 20. Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow came back to haunt his former club and freakishly scored for the 6th consecutive week. Dolphins winger Jermaine Isako also bagged himself a hat-trick, one of many last week. As for the Rabbitohs, they thumped the Bulldogs on Good Friday 50 points to 16. Latrell Mitchell was amazing in his 150th, scoring his first career hat-trick for South Sydney and scored 26 points in the match, which is just 3 points off the club record of 29 in a single game. Campbell Graham is also among the hat-trick scorers last week. His was even more impressive as he managed to score all 3 tries in the space of just 10 minutes. Looking at the teams list and the casualty ward for this one, the Dolphins lost Jared Wallace to a Category 1 concussion, which means he will miss this game. Jesse Bromwich was a late omission due to a throat infection, but should be able to play this week. Both Cody Nikarima and Brenko Lee will face the judiciary, but only for monetary fines, so will be free to play. And Felice Kaufusi still has 1 more week on the sideline. As for the Bunnies, Alex Johnston is expected back this week after he suffered a head knock. Isaac Thompson will likely miss this game after he suffered an ankle injury to a contentious hip drop tackle. This is obviously the first time these two sides have faced, so there's no history to go on. However, I am going to lean towards South Sydney here 1-12. The Dolphins have fought valiantly all season despite having a number of key injuries and outs. However, South Sydney should be too strong, and I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being South 13+, but I want to give the Finns the benefit of the doubt in this one. The first of the 2 Friday fixtures this week has the 11th place Cronulla Sharks taking on the 7th placed Sydney Roosters at PointsBet Stadium in Sydney. The Sharks enjoyed the bye last week but blew a 20-point lead the week prior to the Warriors, eventually going down 30 points to 32. Cronulla's backline was humming in the first 40 but could only manage 4 points in the second half. As for the Roosters, they had a night to forget last week against the Storm, losing 28 points to 8. The Roosters scored first in the 12th minute and then failed to cross the line for the remainder of the match. Their attack was clunky and their ball handling was abysmal, only managing to complete at 61%. Looking at the teams list and casualty ward, Oregon Kaufusi and Wade Graham are expected to be named this week. The Sharks will still be without captain Dale Finucane for a few more rounds, thanks to a suspension. Toby Rudolph also suffered a foot injury in the side's loss to the Warriors and will be out for an extended period of time. As for the Chooks, Nathan Brown, Matt Lodge and James Tedesco are all expected to be named for the Roosters. Satili Tupanua can't be too far away either, as he played his first game of the season last week in the New South Wales Cup side, as he nears a return from an ACL injury. Looking at the two sides head to head, the Roosters have won 7 straight against the Sharks. However, before that the Sharks had won 6 straight. Super tough game to tip this one, but I am going to lean with the Roosters here 1-12. I think the Roosters should be at near full strength this week, especially in their forward pack, whereas the Sharks will now be dealing with a number of injuries and suspensions to their forwards, which ultimately may prove to be the difference. However, it all hinges on the Roosters' halves. If Walker and Carey can fire, the Roosters should be too strong. However, you can never count out Nico Hines and the Sharks' back 5, who have been absolutely outstanding all season. I'd probably have a better chance of getting it right if I flipped a coin, but I'm going to back the Roosters. And the final game on Friday is the classic Battle of Brookie between the 9th placed Manly Sea Eagles and the 3rd placed Melbourne Storm at 4 Pines Park in Sydney. Manly were blown off the park in the first half by the Panthers 32-0, before a more competitive second half saw the game finish 44 points to 12. Jake Trbojevic and Lachlan Croker were some of Manly's best, however they hardly threatened the Panthers in attack. As for the Storm, they comprehensively beat the Roosters 28 points to 8 in Melbourne last Thursday, The combinations of Brown, Munster, Meaney and Hughes were running rings around the Chooks and helped their side enjoy over 60% of possession. Looking at the casualty ward and teams list for this one, Manly winger Ruben Garrick suffered a head knock and was unable to return against the Panthers last week, and his return is yet to be confirmed. Good news for Manly though is Josh Schuster is expected to be back for this one. And as for Melbourne, they aren't expected to make any changes to their lineup from last week. Looking at the two sides head to head, the Storm have won 6 of the past 7 as well as 5 of the last 6 games at 4 Pines Park against the Sea Eagles. Because of that, I do like the Storm in this one by 1 to 12 points. I think Manly will be more competitive at home, but have leaked far too many points this season to tip. Another cracking game, but ultimately I think Melbourne get it done on the road. Kicking off the 3 of the Saturday fixtures, we have the 5th placed NZ Warriors taking on the 15th placed North Queensland Cowboys over here in NZ at Mount Smart Stadium, Auckland. The Wars went down to Newcastle 24 points to 34, but fought hard all the way through. Their handling and discipline in key moments ultimately cost them the game, but SJ continued his run of form, however was unable to see his side across the line. And as for North Queensland, they were upset by the Dolphins 32 points to 22 at home last week, with errors and discipline issues also causing problems for them. That saw 2 players spend time in the bin and only managing to complete their sets at 67%. A big boost for North Queensland this week as Jeremiah Nanai and Jordan McLean are expected back in action. As for the Warriors, both Damari Martin and Wade Egan suffered injuries in their loss to Newcastle and will be in doubt to back up this week, but Tohu Harris is likely to make his return from a knee injury. Looking at the two sides head to head, it has been fairly even in recent times. The Warriors have won 8 of the past 11 games against the Cowboys at Mount Smart and have already beaten the Cowboys once this season. I probably don't need to tell you who I'm going to take here, but I am going to take the Warriors here by 1 to 12 points. I think this will be a super close game. 3 of the past 5 games between the two sides have been decided by 4 points or less, with 2 of those games being decided by a 1-point field goal, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's a similar case here this week. The second of the 3 Saturday fixtures has the 8th placed Newcastle Knights taking on the 2nd placed Penrith Panthers at McDonald Jones Stadium in Newcastle. The Newcastle Knights have continued to impress despite missing key players, beating the Warriors last week 34 points to 24 at home. Lockie Miller has been outstanding in his debut season at fullback, alongside the likes of Young and Marju, while Hastings has provided some much needed direction around the park. As for the Panthers, they pounced all over the Sea Eagles last week, running in 7 tries to 2 in a dominant 44 to 12 point victory. Dylan Edwards bagged a first half hat-trick and scored another in the second to bring his try tally to 4. The Panthers were all over the Sea Eagles with 55% of possession and 12 line breaks to 0. Looking at the casualty ward for this one, Tyson Gamble should be back on deck for Newcastle this week, but both Jaden Brayley and Matt Croker are in doubt. We are also 1 week away from the return of Kalen Ponga, who is expected to be back in action in round 8. As for the Panthers, Liam Martin and Luke Garner are expected to be available for selection this week, but James Fisher-Harris is eyeing a return in round 10 or 11 after suffering a knee injury. Looking at the two sides head to head, the Panthers have won 10 of the past 12 against Newey and have won 6 of their past 7 games at the stadium, with Newcastle's last win over Penrith at home coming all the way back in 2015. The Panthers' attack is finally firing, but the Knights are full of confidence at the moment, so I'm going to take the Panthers by 1 to 12 here. I think the Knights are showing a massive amount of heart this season, so I wouldn't be surprised if they can give the Panthers some sort of fight. But then again, I also wouldn't be surprised if the Panthers blow them out of the water late. And the final game of Super Saturday has the 6th placed Gold Coast Titans taking on the 1st placed Brisbane Broncos at Cbus Super Stadium on the GC. The Titans scored in the 77th minute to pull off a comeback win against the Dragons at home last week, securing a 20 to 18 point win. The win was even more impressive considering they were behind the Dragons in almost every key stat and were without key playmakers AJ Brimson and Kieran Foran. As for Brisbane, they would doubt their first loss of the season, losing to the Raiders at home 20 points to 14. The Broncos dominated in possession but were unable to crack a resilient Canberra side that were winning the contest through the middle. Obviously, there's plenty to discuss about that penalty that went against Marty Tapau on Jordan Rapana, but we'll save that for another time because Canberra were easily the better side on the night. Looking at the casualty ward from last week, and for this one, both Foran and Brimson are high chances to be named this week, alongside Jojo Fafita. And as for the Broncos, they did lose Thomas Flegler early in their loss to Canberra, and his return is yet unknown. Looking at the two sides head to head, it's been fairly even in recent times, winning 5 apiece, although Brisbane have won the last 3 straight. The Titans have also only beaten Brisbane twice at home in their last 8 games. I think this is a make or break game for the Broncos, who need to show their resilience and bounce back hard after last week, so I am going to take the Broncos here by 1 to 12 points. If they play to their ability, they should be far too quick around the park for the Gold Coast. And now moving to the first of the 2 Sunday fixtures, we have the 16th place Canberra Raiders playing host to the 12th place St George Illawarra Dragons at GIO Stadium in Canberra. The Raiders pulled off a massive upset last week, beating the table-topping Broncos at Suncorp 20 points to 14 in a gutsy, determined game. The Raiders won the contest up front and were resilient in defence for the full 80, with Jordan Rapana, Corey Horsburgh, Jamal Fogarty and Elliot Whitehead leading the way. As for St George, their ill-discipline cost them the game against the Gold Coast last week, giving away 6 more penalties than the Gold Coast, eventually conceding late to go down 18 points to 20. Ben Hunt continues to lead the way for his side, but at times looks like a one-man army out there for St George. Big ins for Canberra this week, as they are expecting Joseph Tapine to be available, as well as Jack Wyden, who returns from suspension. Xavier Savage is also a maybe, while Jordan Rapana won't be available after suffering that sickening knee to the head in the dying moments of the game against the Broncos. Looking at the 2 sides head to head, the Dragons have only beaten the Raiders 4 times in the nation's capital since 1999, with the Raiders winning 14 out of 18 games there. Because of that, I do like the Raiders in this one by 1 to 12 points. I think it's a close game, with the last 4 games between the 2 sides in Canberra having only been decided by 6 points or less. I think that continues, so Raiders 1 to 12. And the final game of round 7 has the 14th placed Parramatta Eels taking on the 13th placed Canterbury-Bankstown Bulldogs at CommBank Stadium in Sydney. The Eels managed to break the Easter Monday curse, beating the Titans 28 points to 22 in a close contest. The Eels opened the door for a second half comeback before costly errors from the Tigers slammed it shut. Mitchell Moses was ultimately the difference between the 2 sides on the night, racking up 4 try assists and kicking 4 out of 5 goals to secure his side the 2 points. And as for the Dogs, they will be licking their wounds after getting torched by Souths 50 points to 14 on Good Friday. The Dogs could only manage 43% of possession and would have failed to trouble the scorers if it wasn't for some brilliance from Matt Burton. Good news for Parramatta this week, as Junior Paulo returns from his suspension. The Dogs should also be boosted this week with the return of Okumbo Faitala Mariner and Viliami Kikau, and also potentially Tavita Pangai Jr. However, they have lost speedster Josh Adokar for an extended period after he suffered an ankle injury and has undergone surgery. Looking at the 2 sides head to head, the Eels have won 5 of the past 6 against Canterbury, but have only won 2 of their past 14 games at CommBank. Parramatta are still far from convincing in 2023, so I am only going to take them by 1 to 12 points, although the average winning margin between the 2 sides in the last 4 meetings has been 28 points. In summary, I'm taking every side by 1 to 12 points. That's the Bunnies, the Chooks, the Storm, the Warriors, the Panthers, the Broncos, the Raiders, and the Eels. As always, drop your tips and predictions in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.